Welcome to Theology Thursday, an ecumenical space dedicated to matters of faith and theology.
Well, you really messed that up, didn't you?
When are you going to get it right, Ryan?
Never.
An ecumenical space for students
To discuss matters of faith and theology.
Dedicated was in the old slogan.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm your host, Connor Grubbs.
I am your co-host, Ryan Mock.
And I'm your co-host, Johnny Grubbs.
Man, it is good to be here. Can you remember the old slogan?
Welcome to Theology Thursday, a weekly podcast dedicated to cultivating theological conversations amongst millennials.
Man, that was solid. That's what it was when we began this journey.
Yes.
The
very beginning.
I'm trying to think. I believe it was February of 2017.
2017 or 2018? I think it's 2018. February 2018.
2018, you're right.
Yeah.
I don't know why I said... But it was February,
yes.
I believe.
Yes, it was February.
Yeah,
I distinctly remember it being February.
I Can Only Imagine had just come out in theaters.
Yes.
And, yeah.
That was one of our first... I think that was our first episode.
This is the second episode.
Second episode was talking about Christian movies.
Yeah, it was.
What was our first episode?
Was you talking about Ligonier and the importance of theology.
Oh, yeah.
And we recorded those first couple episodes on this little red, like, kind of crummy recorder with the built-in mics in your dad's garage.
Yes, in the hot, sweaty garage.
It was ridiculously
late
hot.
Night.
It was very late in the evening, and it started out just you and me. And then I believe it was the third episode we brought Johnny on as a guest to talk about a book he had read by Skye Jitani.
Yeah. You read it later, though, didn't you?
I did.
And you liked it.
Yeah, I did. It was a really good book. I listed that as my favorite book of 2018.
Right.
Really? What book was it?
Immeasurable, I believe, was the name of it.
Yeah, we talked about the unquantifiable aspects.
Yes.
Oh, I remember that.
Johnny gave it this ridiculously long title. And anyway, so then we had so much fun with Johnny, we were like, well, why not just have him back on next week? And then he became the co-host.
Yeah.
And he's been a recurring guest ever since.
Yeah.
And which was kind of, that wasn't really planned. That wasn't intentional. It's just like after that episode, we were like, the three of us had a good dynamic together, kind of better than I expected. Not that I expected us not to get along with Johnny. It was just like me and Ryan had our thing. We were doing it. Yeah. And then boom, now we have a third person, and it's just been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and he balances us out because me and Connor are all like orthodox. We believe the Bible, and then Johnny's over here just like, none of it's real, none of it's true.
Yeah,
and wait a second now.
The cool thing about having a heretic on the show is that it helps the listeners realize how sound our theology is.
It's like what they say about counterfeit money. You have to know the real money before you can know what the counterfeit is. So you hear me and Connor sharing the true word, and then now you could recognize when Johnny's just giving us heresy.
For the record, I am orthodox. For first-time listeners, I just have a generous orthodoxy.
Generous. That's what we'll call it.
Generous orthodoxy sounds like something that Joel Osteen would say.
By the way, we're just giving Johnny a hard time.
So this is the season 3 premiere, and it is also momentous because not only is it the season 3 premiere, we're back after a long hiatus, but also this is the 50th episode of Theology Thursday.
Pop! Woo, 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 woo!
Johnny's really excited too. He's looking at stuff on his computer and not paying attention to us.
Bread and butter, man. Bread and butter.
Well, maybe you should have done it before we did this, but it's whatever.
Yeah, we said 50 whole episodes, man.
Yeah, 50 whole episodes, and you weren't on all of them, thank goodness.
This is gonna be the 50th episode, rag on Johnny.
Yeah,
it's a Johnny roast episode.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go through and kind of look through these titles, and we're just gonna have a little trip down memory lane for the 50th episode.
My kids, it was funny because during VBS, somebody asked me, like, do you still do that podcast? And then one of the kids started listening to it. Like, they should have been serving it. They started listening to it. And then they went home that night and, made all their friends listen to it. Right. And they were all sitting around just listening to us talk about different issues.
You know what's weird is, there's, sometimes I meet people just, that are in ministry. And they'll be like, hey, you're part of that podcast with Connor, right? And I'm like, yeah, I am. And that's it. I'm like, people actually listen to our podcast.
Yeah, no, it's bizarre. We have about 350 regular listeners, which is just weird to think about. Why would people listen to us?
Yeah.
Size of a small church.
Yeah, so...
We should start our own church.
No.
It's the size of,
absolutely not.
That's the size of a pretty decent church, actually, in this area.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's super humbling, and we're really grateful for everybody that's been following and enjoying it, and we're really trying to get back to the roots this season. Of kind of second season, we took a break and did some interview type stuff, kind of had people come on and share their testimonies, and it was super cool. But we're getting back to the theology. We're basically going through like a systematic theology, so breaking it down by topic and keeping it in 30-minute, length, so it's easy to listen to when it comes out, just on a drive or whatever, because we had some really long episodes in the past. We're going to keep it at 30 minutes and just go through and tackle these topics, and we have fun doing it. That's kind of the whole idea, is realizing that like theology can actually, like, it's enjoyable to talk about. It doesn't have to be this boring thing.
No, yeah, I have fun having conversations with people about theology, especially like people who have different opinions on what their theology is. Just talk through it, and I think it's fun.
Yeah, being able to especially have a conversation with somebody who's, say, a Buddhist or a Muslim, who's like respectful and like not trying to just get in an argument, but you're actually like having a sincere dialogue about it. Yeah. Those are really enjoyable conversations.
Yes.
I love stuff like that. So we talked about the Christian movies one. I actually really liked I Can Only Imagine.
That's actually right now that's my favorite Christian movie. So I Can Only Imagine.
Well, you're in for good news, because I think we had a subpoint on this, but they're basically the people who made that movie, and then they also made Woodlawn and The Case for Christ.
Yeah.
Those directors are launching their own studio. And they're going to do a Bible cinematic universe.
Nice.
What?
Well, kind of like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, with all the different characters, but like same actors and kind of crossing over and all that stuff. They're going to do like different movies about the apostles and stuff.
That's pretty cool.
I guess so.
Do they have superpowers, though?
I hope so. I mean, technically, they performed a lot of miracles and stuff.
Yeah, but it's not the same as superpowers, you heretic.
It's the power of the Holy Spirit. Are you saying that the power of the Holy Spirit isn't super, Johnny? You're the heretic.
Wow, way to turn that around.
Yeah. So our fourth episode was on baptism, and that was fun because you're Presbyterian, so you like to sprinkle babies and stuff.
Yeah, I came out of the closet to everybody that I sprinkle babies.
And this was probably the one episode where I actually sided with Johnny.
Yeah, that's a real surprise.
What's cool about that episode, though, is we did talk about the greater covenantal, the broader theme of baptism throughout Scripture, like Noah and the flood.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of things that people don't think about
when
it comes to baptism. A lot of people just say, it's just something you do. Yeah. Because Jesus said do it, but there's more to it.
So even though you're wrong, we still saw the broader implications.
Yes, of course. Yes.
Okay. No,
Ryan, we still need to sprinkle Zoe.
Yeah, we
do.
Hey,
guys.
When Johnny's not paying attention, just, a little...
Don't sneak baptize my baby.
We sneak baptize babies all the time.
Yes.
That's like a hobby of ours. Okay, then we talked about global and local missions. That was kind of my first time having... besides Johnny, who was sort of a guest the first time, then became, regular part of the show. Having guests on the show, like interviewing people. My friends Noah McCauley and Eli Joy had been doing some missions work, and we got to talk about that, and it was super cool. And then I interviewed the next week. The next week was actually what many people say is their favorite episode of Theology Thursday, and that is Calvinism versus Arminianism. It's also our longest episode. It's over an hour long.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to do another one like that, because there's so much to say.
Yeah, you and Johnny got kind of heated in that one. That was the first one where there was some tension.
There's so much to say, and it's something that a lot of people are familiar with, and so I can understand why it's a lot of people's favorite episodes. And that's what, I love talking about that stuff, too.
It's definitely, to this day, the one that gets the most feedback. There's so many comments and stuff on that one. And even, new listeners who find our show, that ends up being like one of the first episodes they listen to because everybody wants to. It's a very popular topic in theology.
It's a hot button issue for sure.
That's always people's kind of go-to episode is like that's the gateway episode to Theology Thursday.
And then they get addicted.
Yep, because we're just so good.
Okay, calm down.
So then I had your brother Billy on to talk about Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Again, super fun. We talked about mental health because Johnny doesn't have a lot of it.
You know what? The mental health one, like that's one I remember and that I enjoyed doing. Or at least I don't know if I'm in this one, but I know we did a few on mental health, right?
Yeah, no, this was like just kind of the traditional, the three of us.
Yeah.
Talking about Mental Health Awareness Month and like kind of mental health as a whole and coming at it from a Christian perspective, something Johnny's really passionate about.
Yeah. But actually, I really enjoyed that one because that's an important topic a lot of people don't talk about. You know.
Do you have anything else to add to that, Johnny? Or are you just gonna ignore us?
No, I'm listening the whole time. I've been contributing to the conversation.
You're here to talk.
He's playing a game on his computer.
Okay, that is not true. I am editing our church website.
Yeah. Well, if the website looked good, then maybe I would excuse it. But
what? That's what I'm trying to work on.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
No, I think that I was really happy with to talk about.
I bet you were. Okay. So the next week, I guess we got busy because I ended up just posting one of my old sermons. Then episode 10. This one I distinctly remember. This was, okay, now that neither of us work there anymore, I can actually say this.
Oh, it's this
one. we recorded this at Brookdale Freedom Square during the night shift. And I think I was working, at the time I was working the night shift, and you came.
Wait, he came to your place of work and you guys
recorded? Well, no, he worked there. He just didn't work that shift.
Right, yeah.
But, so after
we still both worked.
Yeah, after everybody was asleep, he just came and we sat at that desk and recorded the episode super late at night because we kind of had to wait till everybody was asleep. It was like after midnight. And it was super impromptu. There was some stuff that had happened that week. The Pope had basically said that he thought gay marriage was okay. And then some Southern Baptist churches, like basically all the Southern Baptist churches in Seattle, were kicked out of the convention because they hired a lesbian co-pastor. So a lot of hot-button issues were happening, and we were able to address it and talk about, marriage from a biblical perspective and sexuality from a biblical perspective.
I also remember recording that, and our coworker had his portable PlayStation with him, and he was playing games.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we can talk about these things now that we don't work there anymore. It was probably
I'm free.
Completely like not okay, but we did it anyway. It was super fun, and honestly, like, shocking how good the episode came out, because we were going to do something else, and I decided because of everything that was going on we needed to do this instead. It was very last minute.
Yeah.
And it actually turned out to be a really solid episode.
Yeah. And Johnny was not there.
Addressing those issues. I don't think he ever listened to it either. But who cares? But then next, because Johnny never listens if he's not on it.
Okay. Wow.
Well,
I understand why you're throwing so much shade at me, man.
To be fair, I don't either.
Okay. Well. So then we did a 4-part series on eschatology.
Wow.
That was my fondest memory.
Yeah. I think so too, because I think out of all the topics, that was the one where there was the most agreement amongst the three of us.
Yeah. Yeah, probably.
So it was kind of fun, like, figuring out together, okay, how are we going to communicate this? But we were all pretty much on the same page. And just, I feel like eschatology is something that there's so much false teaching on and so much misleading stuff out there.
Yeah.
And it's a lot simpler than we tend to make it. So it was kind of cool getting to break that down.
Yeah. I think that was something that I was studying too a lot in Bible college, and just the different views on it. And then when we were presented with a view more in line with what we talked about, which is more about the redemptive aspects of Revelation and just like understanding apocalyptic literature and reading it the way the original reader would have read it, I was like, why haven't I heard this before? And I think that's probably the most cool thing about that episode is it's an orthodox view that a lot of people hold.
Right.
But you don't hear about it. You hear about Left Behind.
And Nicolas Cage.
And the Nick Cage study Bible. And, all that fun stuff. And I actually had a Nick Cage. It's a Tim LaHaye study Bible. And just so many notes in there that are just like, oh, okay.
Well, even my John MacArthur study Bible, he's a Calvinist, but he's a dispensationalist, and so somebody just tried to call you.
Yeah, but I canceled it because we're recording a podcast right now.
Right? Get wrecked. So yeah, even John MacArthur, you read through his study Bible, particularly apocalyptic literature like Revelations. You could definitely see his viewpoint in the study Bible. So.
Yeah. Well, and one valuable lesson I learned from it was not to have podcast titles with like big words, because I think if we had just called it End Times Part 1, End Times Part 2, maybe people would have listened, but we called it Eschatology. Nobody listened to that series, which is sad because I think it's our best one.
So if you're one of our 350 regular listeners and you haven't gone back through the episodes, go back and listen to that series because it's not as boring as the titles.
Yeah, because it's... Look at this. Eschatology Part 1, Exegetical Views. Eschatology Part 2, Apocalyptic Literature. Part 3, The Millennium. And Part 4, Tribulation. They all sound like big words and really academic. It's not... The whole point was kind of breaking it down into, like, its most basic. Like, hey, it's not that complicated. So you should go back and listen to that. And then because nobody was listening to those, we ended up not doing Part 5 and just doing Who's the Antichrist, which got a lot of listens. And
it's not Barack Obama.
We confirmed.
Nor is it, I think, any U.S. president that we've had. So that was kind of interesting, getting to talk about that. Then you and I for 4th of July. Johnny was not in this episode, so we can kind of kick him out of the conversation again. But we talked about, is nationalism a sin?
Ooh.
Oh, wow.
I also remember you came over to my house and recorded it, and there was lots of exciting personal things going on in our life at the time. We sat out there at the chairs in that hallway and talked about all sorts of exciting things that were going on at the time.
I remember a few things that I mentioned.
Yeah, that summer was a strange time.
Oh, yeah, that was.
Oh, boy. God bless us, everyone. And then, or it might have been the next week, because you came over to my house again to talk about the Great Awakening.
It was one of those weeks.
It was one of those weeks, because I remember it was in the summer, and both of those we recorded at my house at the dining room table. And my dad interrupted both episodes and made guest appearances on the show for a brief moment.
Yes.
So that was fun. I love talking about church history,
and
I always like kind of letting you take the lead on those, because I know you really love church history.
Yeah.
So those are cool. Maybe we should start a separate podcast called Church History Friday.
No.
Okay, fine. No, but I do think church history has a great bearing on theology, and it's something that kind of naturally interweaves itself into these conversations.
Absolutely.
Then the next one is our second most popular episode, right after Calvinism, by the title Unicorns, Zachary Levi, and Justin Bieber.
See, we need more clickbait like this.
Yes.
So, and the description is, this is what happens when Ryan is gone. You were out for that episode, and we did take some Q&A stuff and just pick some random things. Johnny and I talked about kind of pop culture kind of things that were going on, and how Zachary Levi started a house church, and Justin Bieber talked about his faith, and are unicorns in the Bible, just random things. What's funny is, your dad mentioned he really liked that episode, Ryan, and your dad's very...
My dad is a Justin Bieber fan, so...
I hope you're joking. The world may never know.
The world may never know.
But, however, he... It was surprising to me, because he's very much into the deeper things of theology.
He's not a man of frivolity.
And he enjoyed this episode.
Speaking of Q&A, we should do some more Q&A stuff.
Yes, and we will. And we're going to talk about all of kind of our plans for this season at the end. We talked about what heaven and hell are like. I honestly don't remember making that episode.
Really? I do.
Wait. Was this when we were in Johnny's church?
Yeah.
We did one on annihilationism?
Yeah, was this the one where we talked about annihilationism and universal reconciliation?
We were in the were we in the sound booth at Johnny's church?
No, that was one of the eschatology episodes. We were at...
Oh, I remember, yeah.
When we talked about heaven and hell, we were in the church Connor was working with at the time.
Oh, yeah, Azalea.
Oh,
yeah.
that church.
Yeah, we were meeting in his office. But I remember that episode. I thought it was an important episode because I think a lot of people... It was something I was thinking about even recently as I was reading. And I was like... There are many orthodox views on hell, and people don't realize
He keeps trying to claim that they're orthodox.
Yeah,
they are, though. Oh, my goodness. I was just studying this the other day.
Anyway, then we started to get a little more into guest. We had Scott Mahiran on, who ended up coming on the show several times to talk about the pro-life movement and the importance of standing up for life, but also like how to have those conversations with people, because it's a very difficult topic. So that was really cool. Then we addressed this was a question from a listener about like speaking in tongues. That was one of my favorites.
Didn't we also do that at your house?
Yeah, we did, and Johnny wasn't in that episode either.
Yeah, I remember that.
But that's one of my favorites because I feel like we did a pretty good job in like working. I this year started a worship ministry, and you know it's something that often has to be addressed in that setting, especially in a non-denominational like worship ministry. So
yeah,
you know, knowing what you believe about it and why you believe it is super important. And then we had Hugh on the show to talk about InterVarsity. And I will be seeing Hugh this Saturday. And you are no longer part of InterVarsity.
Rip.
Rip in peace. Then I had all the guys who now started the Pinellas Worship Collective with me come to talk about like keeping the camp high going. Which we got some more listens after camp this year because we kind of reshared it.
Oh, yeah,
so,
that's right.
You know, you kind of give it a little boost. Okay, this was the other mental health episode we did. You were not in this one, and we had special guest Mitch Vandenbroek on for this one, which I don't think, Johnny, you had ever met him before. So it's kind of, we all just jumped on Skype and did it.
Yeah.
And talked about suicide and is that the unforgivable sin? The answer is no, by the way. You should go listen to that episode. That is our third most popular episode, and we've gotten a lot of really, really good feedback on that one. There's been several students who are really struggling with that issue that after listening to the episode actually went and talked to somebody.
Oh, good.
Or like realized, oh wait, this isn't the unforgivable sin, and but like also God like has a plan for my life, you know.
Right.
So it's really cool. There's been about 3 or 4 students that have reached out and said that like they talked to somebody because of that episode.
Wow.
So, you know, honestly, like at the end of the day, forget all the other episodes. Like stuff like that is why we do this.
Yeah, that's important. That's awesome.
And I think that's like a huge testimony to like why the podcast, you know, actually does kind of matter, even though we're a bunch of goofballs.
That's right.
I had a guy from St. Pete Underground come on to talk about house churches and like, you know, that structure of church in the midst of very traditional church.
Yeah.
Kind of thing, which I don't necessarily endorse that, but not house churches, but St. Pete Underground. But it's still interesting to have people with different perspectives come and share, you know,
Dang.
their ministry philosophy. So, then you had a question from a friend that you wanted to address. How do you reconcile God's love with His wrath?
Yeah, I remember that episode.
And then we were going to do a whole series on the Reformation. We talked about the forerunners of the Reformation. We talked about Martin Luther. And then my life got really crazy. And we just ended the show right in the middle of October, very unexpectedly. And we almost never came back.
Rip. Theology Thursday.
Rip in pieces. That was interesting. We were like, is it over?
Is this the end of Theology Thursday?
And so we kind of took November and December to kind of take stock and think about that. And then January, we were back for season 2.
Nice.
We had the founder of Maple Street on the show, did a discount. That was kind of a fun, like, you know, episode because people could get, like, free biscuits by listening and sharing. We had the superintendent of Keswick Christian School on. We had your dad on.
That's right. This is when you did all those interviews.
Yeah, this season 2.
This was the interview phase.
Season 2 is all about interviews. Scott Mahiran came back on. The one with your dad was fun. We had Brandon on, a friend of ours, come share his testimony.
I remember that.
All the while, I'm sitting there wondering, am I on the show anymore?
And the answer was no.
Did they kick me off without telling me?
And And then, oh yeah, I actually remember one day being in the car and Dad being like, Johnny thinks that you kicked him off the show. He said, I don't think he's really, like, upset about it or anything, but you should probably just tell him, you know, like...
That's what I was talking to Dad one day. He was like, so how's the podcast going? I'm like, I don't know. I don't think I'm on it anymore. And because we were doing all those interviews, I thought we were going to do intros to him or whatever, but I knew it was crazy at the time.
Yeah. And we thought we were too, and a lot of the interviews ended up being like 40 minutes on their own. And I was like, well, there's not much to say, like, to introduce it. So it ended up just being me interviewing people for several episodes in a row, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
Those were the dark ages of theology.
And then episode 34 is pretty momentous. We had the first time we ever allowed women on our podcast.
What? I don't remember this. Who authorized this?
But self-image, that's another episode that's gotten a lot of, like, Kenesha and Caitlin came on, friends of mine, and shared, and Caitlin had suffered from, like, a eating disorder and all these things, and their testimonies on, like, self-image and all this stuff. And that episode was also, like, a lot of students responded and, like, hey, this was, like, really helpful for me. Like, a lot of young girls that heard the episode. So stuff like that's been, like, really cool to see. Probably the most fun I've ever had recording an episode of Theology Thursday, no offense, Johnny, was with Mac.
Oh, yes.
Was hysterical.
Oh, my gosh. That may be my favorite now that I think about that.
That was really... Well, I mean, I don't think it's actually my favorite episode, but it was hilarious to me.
We need to have Mac back on the podcast.
Well, you don't listen to them, Johnny, so you wouldn't know. Right. Mac is just a funny person.
Mac is one of the funniest people you will ever meet.
What was it about?
It was about anxiety. And it was hysterical.
Interesting.
So, then another one I really liked was What is Worship? This guy, J.D. Wheeler, came in and just kind of broke it down, and it's something that, like, I'm super passionate about in this season, and it was, like, I had never met the guy before either. This was, like, kind of unique, because usually I knew the guest. This was somebody, like, kind of referred to me.
Yeah.
And I trusted the person who referred him, so I was like, all right, whatever. He drove all the way from Tampa to Seminole to record this episode. I never met him before, and it was, like, immediate friends. Like, when you hear that episode, that was, like, the first conversation we had ever had. So,
wow,
we just started recording, and I was like, this could go horribly wrong, but it was awesome. And you can tell for the first, like, 10 minutes that it was really awkward, but once we got in, it was, like, super good. Then we did one on stewardship where we kind of switched it a little bit, and the guest interviewed me.
What?
Instead of me interviewing the guest. He had to interview somebody for a school project that was, like, involved in ministry. And we ended up making it an episode of the show.
Oh, that's fun.
And it's one that your brother Billy's a big fan of. We talked about stewardship and, you know, like handling finances. Which is kind of funny because I'm not good at it. But I know what the Bible says about it. So a couple that I really liked, we talked about St. Patrick.
I remember that, yeah.
We had talked about St. Valentine, too, that season. Like, the actual, like, again, like, getting into church history. We, on episode 40, we're getting closer now. Episode 40, we shared our testimonies, and Johnny shared about the cow cartoon.
Oh, yes. We're definitely going to have to give that a watch.
No, so we are going to have a live stream of us watching Annabelle's Wish around Christmas time. That was something that was promised on that episode. That is still happening. That is going to be part of season 3. We had Mitch back on to talk about divorce. We give him the easy ones. Suicide, divorce. We just kind of give him the easiest topics we can find.
Yeah, I'm so glad he had interviews for this period.
Yeah. Then we came back together to talk about apologetics.
That was recent. I remember that.
There were a couple of breaks that we took. We had Charles DeMarco and Saul Pitch on, some really awesome guys who are in charge of New Life Solutions on. That was like probably the coolest guest we had during that whole season. Just really grateful for their time. We got to record it there at the office. Then we were really desperate, so we posted one of Johnny's sermons.
A dark time for us.
Finished our apologetics series. I had my lady friend on to talk about science, and I let her do all the talking because I hate science. We talked about covenant theology.
I like that episode.
And we had our season finale. Kind of wrapped the whole thing up. And here we are.
I was telling Connor this, and Connor and Johnny this earlier. Like, when we started this, never would have thought we'd get to episode 50.
Over
a year later.
Yeah.
I did have little faith.
It's crazy. Yeah, and we were just talking about, like, well, if we ever make it episode 100, we'll have to do something really big. And Ryan was just saying, like, at this rate, I mean, if we made it this far...
If we made it this far, then we could totally make it to episode 100.
I mean, honestly, as long as my health permits, I will keep making Theology Thursday.
And as long, we've actually grown. Like, apparently people listen to us.
Yeah.
So if we keep doing this, the hope is that more people will listen to us.
And then we'll become billionaires. That's the end goal.
That's really the only reason why I'm doing this.
It's all for the money.
It's all for the money.
Yeah, it really is. No, but we actually are kind of... Okay, so kind of the future of Theology Thursday.
Ooh.
One of the things we're going to start doing... So, Theology Thursday has kind of come under Youth Outreach United, a ministry of which I am the area director for, and one of the exciting things about that is we're actually going to do some, like, live episodes, meaning, like, at some of our conferences and stuff, doing, like, Q&A sessions with the host of Theology Thursday.
What?
But we have some discipleship conferences and things like that where we're going to be able to kind of use this as a way just to interact with students, because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
That's cool.
And that's something that'll be coming more in the fall, and you'll get to hear more about that. We're going through the systematic theology, like I had said. And what I learned, so last season we really got away from the original intention of the show, because I was doing all these interviews, because there were a couple interviews in the first season, and they were really good. But what I realized is that people sharing their testimonies and us talking about theology are two very different things, and trying to fit it all into one podcast just didn't work. So we're also launching another podcast.
What?
When I say we, I mean Youth Outreach United. You guys...
Yeah, I'm not a part of the new podcast.
I didn't sign you up for another podcast. But it's just where I'm going to be going and interviewing ministry leaders across the state of Florida and Georgia. It's called the Kingdom Builders Podcast. Release dates to be announced, but we already have several interviews recorded, and it's really cool. So if you liked Season 2, you're going to want to subscribe to this podcast as well, because it's going to be a very similar feel of having guests on to talk.
But if you're packed for time and you can only choose one,
definitely
choose Theology Thursday.
Except a lot of episodes of Theology Thursday were like an hour last year, and we're trying to keep them all 30 minutes, and then Kingdom Builders will also be 30 minutes.
But still, if you're packed for time...
Okay.
I'm so sorry. I'm
not
trying
to hear your heresy.
I'm not trying to put them against each other.
It's okay.
No, they're both important. Connor's doing important.
But Theology Thursday is better.
No, it's fine. It probably is. But yeah. So and then we are gonna live stream Annabelle's Wish around Christmas time. We're gonna do a few around the.
Hopefully, people will get saved. I mean, that's how I got saved.
Yeah, I mean, I hope I get saved.
I might get saved again. I think I already lost my salvation.
It's definitely possible. Being around Johnny, that happens. But we're gonna do a lot of kind of interactive, kind of live stuff around the holidays, and we're super excited about what the future holds.
Theology Thanksgiving.
Yeah, we are going to do, because Thanksgiving is on a Thursday.
Yes.
So
we could dress up. We could be the Puritans, and Johnny could be an Indian boy.
Before this goes off the rails any more than it already has, we're really excited for many more subpoints and theology and everything. Thank you for joining us for these past 50 episodes, and
we're excited for 50 more.
Yeah, and becoming billionaires. Catch you on the flippity flop. As always, thank you for listening to Theology Thursday. You can find old episodes on iTunes, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, YouTube, and Podbean. You can send questions that you want us to answer on the show to theologythursdaypodcast@gmail.com, and you can also find us on Instagram and Facebook. We hope to have you back next Thursday.